The autumn air was crisp that Saturday morning at the Harvest Community Fair, and I was feeling good about life for the first time in months. My brother Michael had been staying with us for 6 months, helping out with my 7-year-old daughter, Zara, while I worked my nursing shifts at Denver Children's Hospital. Things were finally falling into place. I was restocking brochures at the hospital's volunteer booth, watching Zara bounce excitedly between the face painting station and the balloon artist. Michael was supposed to be keeping an eye on her, but I could see him chatting with some woman by the apple cider stand, completely distracted. Typical Michael, I thought, with a mix of affection and mild irritation. That's when I noticed Zara talking to Officer Patricia Valdez near the police safety demonstration. At first I smiled. Zara had always been drawn to people in uniforms, asking endless questions about their jobs. But something about the way she was standing, so serious and focused, made me start walking toward them. As I got closer, I heard my daughter's clear, matter-of-fact voice cutting through the carnival noise. "Officer, Uncle Mike took my sister." My steps faltered. I almost laughed. Zara was an imaginative kid, always creating elaborate stories, but she didn't have a sister. I quickened my pace, already preparing to apologize to the officer for my daughter's active imagination. But Officer Valdez wasn't smiling anymore. She had crouched down to Zara's eye level, her expression shifting from casual friendliness to professional concern. "Oh, honey, where did he take her?" the officer asked, gently. "To the special place," Zara replied without hesitation. "But she doesn't like it there. She cries a lot." The words hit me like ice water. This wasn't Zara's usual storytelling voice. There was no excitement, no dramatic flair, just a 7-year-old stating facts with the kind of calm certainty that made my stomach drop. I reached them just as Officer Valdez looked up and made eye contact with me. The expression on her face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be a simple case of childhood imagination run wild. "Excuse me, are you this little girl's mother?" she asked, standing up slowly. "Yes, I'm Rebecca Chen. I'm so sorry, officer. Zara has quite the imagination. She doesn't actually have a sister." The words tumbled out of me, desperate to return to normal, to make this strange moment disappear. But Zara looked up at me with those big brown eyes, the same eyes that had always been able to read me better than I could read myself, and said something that stopped my heart. "Mama, she's not pretend. She's real and she's scared." Officer Valdez placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Ma'am, could I speak with you privately for just a moment?" As we walked a few steps away from Zara, who was now quietly watching the K-9 demonstration, the officer's words felt surreal. "Mrs. Chen, I've been working with children for 15 years. While many kids have imaginary friends or tell stories, there are certain phrases and behaviors that raise red flags. The language your daughter used, particularly saying someone took her sister, combined with her mention of crying and a special place, these are concerning indicators." My mind raced back over the past few months. Michael helping with bedtime stories. Michael volunteering to watch Zara when I worked late. Michael being the perfect, helpful brother I'd always wished he could be. "What are you suggesting?" I managed to ask. "I'm suggesting you have a gentle conversation with your daughter about what she means. Children often try to tell us things in the only way they know how. Sometimes what sounds like imagination is actually their way of reporting something real." I looked back at Zara, who was now petting the police dog, but kept glancing back at us with an expression far too serious for a 7-year-old at a carnival. In that moment, I realized I had a choice to make. I could dismiss this as childhood fantasy and go back to my comfortable life, or I could trust that my daughter might be trying to tell me something that would change everything. The carnival. Sounds faded around me as I made a decision that would shatter the life I thought I knew and reveal a truth hiding right under my nose. 3 years ago, when my ex-husband David walked out on us, I thought my world had ended. He left me with a 4-year-old daughter, a mortgage I could barely afford on a single income, and the crushing realization that I was completely on my own. But somehow, we survived. Zara and I had built a quiet, predictable life together in our small 2-bedroom house in suburban Denver. My days followed the same rhythm. 12-hour shifts at Denver Children's Hospital, where I worked as a pediatric Nurse followed by evenings helping Zara with homework, making dinner, and collapsing into bed only to repeat it all the next day. The weekends were ours, filled with trips to the park, movie nights on the couch, and the kind of easy companionship that develops between a mother and daughter when they're each other's whole world. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Zara was thriving in second grade, making friends easily with her infectious laugh and boundless curiosity. I had learned to be proud of what we'd accomplished together, just the two of us. Then, 6 months ago, Michael showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and the kind of defeated expression I'd never seen on my older brother's face before. "Rebecca, I know this is a lot to ask," he had said, standing on my front porch in the February cold, "but I lost the job, the divorce is final, and Jennifer got the house. I've got nowhere else to go." Michael had always been the golden child growing up. 2 years older than me, he was the one who got the athletic scholarships, the easy charm, the ability to talk his way out of any trouble. While I studied hard and followed rules, Michael coasted on natural talent and that infectious smile that made everyone want to help him. But standing there that February evening, he looked broken. His usually perfect hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes that reminded me of the big brother who used to check for monsters under my bed when we were kids. "Of course you can stay," I had said without hesitation. "The spare room is yours for as long as you need it." Zara had been thrilled. She'd only met Uncle Michael a handful of times at family gatherings, but she remembered him as the fun adult who taught her card tricks and always had interesting stories. Having him in the house brought an energy we hadn't realized we were missing. Michael threw himself into being helpful. He picked up Zara from school on days when my shift ran late. He cooked dinner when I was exhausted, filling our little kitchen with the smell of his famous spaghetti sauce and garlic bread. He helped Zara with math homework, showing a patience I didn't remember him having when we were young. "Uncle Mike makes the best pancakes," Zara would announce on Saturday mornings, syrup sticky on her chin as Michael flipped another perfect circle in our old cast iron pan. "Uncle Mike says I'm getting really good at multiplication," she'd report after homework sessions, beaming with pride. For the first time since David left, I felt like we were a real family again. Michael's presence meant I didn't have to worry about finding a babysitter for every extra shift. It meant Zara had someone to play catch with in the backyard. It meant I had another adult to talk to at the end of long days. The guilt I'd initially felt about my brother's circumstances faded as I watched how naturally he fit into our routine. He was good with Zara in ways that surprised me. Patient when she was cranky, creative when she was bored, gentle when she scraped her knee or had a bad dream. "He's really stepped up," I told my friend Sarah one evening over coffee. "I think losing everything made him realize what actually matters. Zara adores him, and honestly, I don't know what we'd do without him now." Michael had been interviewing for jobs, but the market was tough. His background in marketing didn't translate easily, and at 42 he was competing with younger candidates. I told him not to rush it, to take time to figure out what he really wanted to do next. We were managing fine financially with his small contributions and my overtime shifts. The only change I noticed in our household was that Zara seemed to be going through a phase of vivid dreams and elaborate storytelling. She'd always been imaginative, but lately, her stories had taken on a more intense quality. "Mama, did you know there are secret rooms in houses where people hide things?" she asked one morning over breakfast. "That sounds like something from one of your books, sweetie," I replied, not really paying attention as I packed her lunch. "Uncle, Mike says some houses have places that nobody knows about except special people," she continued. Michael looked up from his coffee with a smile. I was telling her about hidden passages in old castles, like in those fairy tale books she loves. These conversations became more frequent. Zara would mention mysterious sounds at night, or ask questions about why some people might be sad even when other people are being nice to them. I chalked it up to her active imagination and the natural curiosity of a 7-year-old who was probably picking up on adult emotions she couldn't quite understand. The morning of the Harvest Community Fair, I woke up feeling genuinely content. The autumn sunlight was streaming through my bedroom window. I could hear Michael and Zara laughing in the kitchen over what sounded like a pancake-making disaster, and for the first time in months I wasn't worried about money or childcare or the crushing loneliness that had defined my life for so long. "Mama, Uncle Mike says the fair has real police horses," Zara announced when I stumbled into the kitchen, still in my pajamas and badly in need of coffee. Michael handed me a mug, perfectly prepared with the amount of cream I liked. "I figured we could make a whole day of it. I'll keep an eye on Zara. While you work your volunteer shift, then we can all go on some rides together." Looking at my brother, who had transformed from the defeated man on my doorstep 6 months ago into someone who seemed genuinely happy, helping with my daughter and contributing to our little household, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "That sounds perfect," I said, meaning it completely. As we got ready that morning, with Zara chattering excitedly about face painting and Michael helping her pick out the perfect autumn outfit, I remember thinking that sometimes the worst things that happen to you can lead to the best unexpected gifts. Michael losing his job and his marriage had brought him back into our lives in a way that felt like coming home. I had no idea that in just a few hours, that same sense of family and security would be shattered by 6 simple words from my daughter's mouth. The hospital's volunteer booth was busier than I'd expected. Parents kept stopping by to grab information about our new pediatric mental health resources, and I found myself restocking brochures every 20 minutes. It was the kind of productive distraction I enjoyed, especially knowing that Zara was having the time of her life somewhere behind me in the carnival chaos. Every few minutes I'd glance over my shoulder to check on her. She'd started the morning glued to Michael's side, but as her confidence grew, she began wandering further from him to explore the different booths. Michael seemed relaxed about giving her space, occasionally calling out reminders about staying where he could see her, but mostly just keeping a casual eye on her movements. Around 11:30, I noticed Zara had discovered the police safety demonstration area. Officer Patricia Valdez, who I recognized from previous community events, was showing a group of kids how the K9 unit worked. Zara was standing at the edge of the crowd, watching with the intense focus she reserved for things that truly fascinated her. I smiled, thinking about how she'd peppered our mailman with questions about his truck just last week. Zara had never met a uniform she didn't want to learn about. When Officer Valdez finished the demonstration and the other kids drifted away toward the face painting booth, I saw Zara approach the officer directly. From my position about 30 feet away, it looked like a perfectly normal interaction. The officer crouched down to Zara's height, smiling in the patient way that people who work with children develop. Zara was gesturing as she talked, her little hands moving in the animated way they always did when she was explaining something important. I turned back to organizing pamphlets, thinking nothing of it. If anything, I was proud that my daughter felt comfortable approaching adults in authority positions. It showed confidence and curiosity, traits I'd been trying to nurture since David left. But something made me look back again. Maybe it was a change in Zara's posture, or the way Officer Valdez had stopped smiling and was listening with a different kind of attention. My daughter was no longer gesturing excitedly. Instead, she was standing very still, speaking in what appeared to be a serious, measured way. That's when I heard it. "Officer, Uncle Mike took my sister." The words carried across the space between us with perfect clarity, cutting through the carnival noise like a knife. I actually stopped moving, my hand frozen halfway to the brochure box as my brain tried to process what I just heard. Zara didn't have a sister. She'd never had a sister. She'd occasionally mentioned wanting one, especially after playdates, with friends who had siblings, but she'd never created an imaginary sister before. And the word took hit my ears wrong. Children said brought or went with, not took. I started walking toward them, my nursing training kicking in with that familiar calm in crisis feeling. There had to be a simple explanation. Zara was probably talking about a doll or stuffed animal. Kids her age often treated toys like real people in their stories. But as I got closer, I could hear Officer Valdez responding with the kind of gentle, professional tone that suggested she was taking this conversation seriously. "Oh, honey, where did he take her?" the officer asked. "To the special place," Zara answered without hesitation. "But she doesn't like it there. She cries a lot." My steps faltered. The matter-of-fact way Zara delivered those words sent ice through my veins. This wasn't her storytelling voice, full of dramatic pauses and exciting details. This was her reporting voice, the same tone she used when telling me about her day at school or what happened during recess. She cries a lot. 7-year-olds didn't usually include emotional distress in their fantasy games. When Zara played with her dolls, they went on adventures and had tea parties and solved mysteries. They didn't cry in special places where they didn't want to be. I reached them just as Officer Valdez stood up, her expression shifting from friendly curiosity to professional concern. When she saw me approaching, her eyes immediately found mine with a look that made my stomach drop. "Excuse me, are you this little girl's mother?" she asked. "Yes, I'm Rebecca Chen," I said quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded fake even to my own ears. "I'm so sorry, officer. Zara has quite the imagination. She doesn't actually have a sister." I looked down at my daughter, expecting to see the sheepish grin she usually wore when caught embellishing a story. Instead, Zara looked up at me with an expression of startling seriousness. "Mama, she's not pretend," she said quietly. "She's real, and she's scared." The way she said scared made my heart skip. It wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking. It was matter-of-fact and sad, the way she might tell me that a bird we found had a broken wing. Officer Valdez placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Ma'am, could I speak with you privately for just a moment?" As we walked a few steps away, I glanced back at Zara. She had turned her attention to the German Shepherd that was part of the K9 demonstration, but she kept looking over at us with an expression that seemed far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Mrs. Chen," Officer Valdez began, her voice low and serious. "I've been working with children for 15 years. While many kids have imaginary friends or tell elaborate stories, there are certain phrases and behavioral indicators that we're trained to recognize as potential red flags." "Red flags for what?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "The specific language your daughter used concerns me. Children typically don't use the word took when talking about imaginary scenarios. They say went or brought or played, and her mention of someone crying in a place they don't like, combined with the term special place, these are phrases that often come up when children are trying to report something real but don't have the vocabulary or understanding to explain it clearly. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. "You think she's trying to tell you that someone actually took a real person somewhere?" "I think your daughter believes she's reporting something that really happened. Whether that's based on something she witnessed, something she overheard, or something else entirely, I can't say. But her body language, her tone, the consistency of her answers, these suggest she's trying to communicate about a real situation." My mind immediately went to Michael. He was the only Uncle Mike in Zara's life, but the idea was absurd. Michael helped her with homework. He made her favorite pancakes on Saturday mornings. He tucked her in at night when I was working late shifts. "Officer, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," I started, but she held up a gentle hand. "I'm not making any accusations. Mrs. Chen, I'm simply suggesting that you have a calm, non-leading conversation with your daughter about what she means. Ask open-ended questions. Let her tell you in her own words what she's trying to communicate." I looked back at Zara again. She was now sitting cross-legged next to the police dog, stroking its fur with the kind of gentle, careful movements she used with animals. But every few seconds she glanced toward the parking lot where I could see Michael talking to the woman by the apple cider stand. "Sometimes children try to tell us things in the only way they know how," Officer Valdez continued. "What sounds like imagination to adults might actually be a child's attempt to report something they've seen or experienced, but don't fully understand. What are you suggesting I do? Tonight, when you're in a private, comfortable setting, ask her about her sister. Don't lead the questions. Don't suggest answers. Just listen. If she maintains consistent details about a real person, especially details about distress or unwillingness to be somewhere, then we need to take this seriously." The carnival sounds continued around us. Children laughing and parents chatting. The whole world continuing normally while mine tilted off its axis. I thought about the past 6 months, about how grateful I'd been for Michael's help, about how perfectly he'd fit into our little family. Then I thought about Zara's recent nightmares, the ones she claimed she couldn't remember clearly. I thought about her new habit of asking strange questions about hiding places and secret rooms. I thought about how she'd become more clingy lately, wanting to sleep in my bed more often, seeming reluctant to be alone in certain parts of the house. All things that I'd attributed to normal childhood phases, or maybe some lingering adjustment issues from having a new person in our household. If she's telling the truth about this sister, I heard myself asking, where would this person be? Officer Valdez's expression grew even more serious. That would depend on what your daughter has actually seen or heard. But Mrs. Chen, if there is even a possibility that a real person is being held somewhere against their will, we need to figure that out as quickly as possible. Standing there in the bright autumn sunlight, surrounded by the innocent chaos of a community fair, I realized I was facing a choice that would change everything. I could dismiss this conversation, go home, and continue living the life I thought I knew. Or I could trust that my 7-year-old daughter might be trying to tell me something that would shatter every assumption I'd made about the man I'd welcomed into our home. The woman by the apple cider stand threw back her head and laughed at something Michael was saying. He caught my eye across the carnival grounds and waved, giving me that same charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble our whole lives. For the first time in 6 months, that smile didn't make me feel safe. The drive home from the carnival felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Michael chatted casually about the woman he'd met at the cider stand, some divorced teacher named Linda, who'd asked for his number. Zara sat quietly in her booster seat, unusually subdued for someone who'd just spent the day at a fair. Every time I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, she was staring out the window with that same serious expression she'd worn while talking to Officer Valdez. "You're quiet back there, kiddo," Michael said, turning around to look at her. "Did you have fun today?" "Yes," Zara replied, but her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. "Uncle Mike, do you think the police dog was sad?" "Sad? Why would he be sad? He seemed pretty happy to me." "Sometimes animals look happy, but they're really sad inside," she said thoughtfully. "Like when they want to go home, but they can't." Michael laughed, but I caught something forced in the sound. "That's pretty deep thinking for a 7-year-old. Where do you come up with this stuff?" Zara didn't answer, just went back to staring out the window. When we got home, I went through the motions of our usual Sunday routine. Michael announced he was going to take a nap before his night shift at the security company, disappearing into his room with his laptop as he always did. I helped Zara change out of her fair clothes and started thinking about dinner, but my mind kept circling back to Officer Valdez's words. "Ask open-ended questions. Let her tell you in her own words." Michael emerged from his room around 4:30, showered and dressed in his security uniform. "I'll grab something to eat at work," he said, kissing the top of Zara's head as she worked on a coloring book at the kitchen table. "You two have a good evening." I watched through the front window as he drove away, my heart pounding with an anxiety I couldn't name. Once his taillights disappeared around the corner, I made a decision. "Zara, how about we make some hot chocolate and have girl time on the couch?" Her face brightened for the first time all day. "With the little marshmallows?" "With all the marshmallows you want." I made the hot chocolate with extra care, warming the milk slowly and adding a generous amount of chocolate syrup. I even dug out the fancy mugs we usually saved for special occasions. This felt like the most important conversation I'd ever have with my daughter, and I wanted her to feel safe and comfortable. We settled onto the living room couch with our mugs and her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanut. The late afternoon sunlight was filtering through our curtains, creating the kind of cozy atmosphere that usually made our house feel like a haven. "Mama, are you worried about something?" Zara asked, studying my face with those perceptive eyes. "I just wanted to talk to you about today," I said carefully. "About what you told the police officer." Zara took a careful sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a small mustache of foam on her upper lip. "About my sister?" "Yes, sweetie. Can you tell me more about your sister?" "She's not really my sister," Zara said matter-of-factly, "but I call her that because she doesn't have anyone else." "Like when you call Aunt Sarah your sister even though she's really just your friend." This was news to me. Zara had never mentioned having a special friend before, certainly not one she considered a sister figure. "Where does your sister live?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Here," Zara said simply, "in the house." My blood ran cold, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Here in our house?" "In the down below room. The one with the little window that Uncle Mike said was just for storage. The basement. We had a partially finished basement that I used for storing holiday decorations and old furniture. There was a small window well on the far side that I'd always meant to get better locks for, but it faced our backyard and seemed secure enough." "Zara, have you been going down to the basement by yourself?" She nodded. "Sometimes when Uncle Mike goes to work and you're sleeping. I heard crying one night, and I thought maybe there was a hurt animal down there." "What did you find when you went downstairs?" "A girl. She was scared of me at first, but then I told her I was friendly. She's bigger than me, but smaller than you. She has pretty dark hair, but it's all messy now." My hands started shaking. I set down my mug before I could drop it. "What's this girl's name?" "Natasha. She told me not to tell anyone about her because Uncle Mike said it would be dangerous. But she's always crying, and she looks hungry, so I started bringing her snacks." Natasha. The name hit me like a physical blow. Natasha Reeves, the 15-year-old, who'd gone missing 4 months ago. Her picture had been all over the local news for weeks. Her parents had appeared on television, pleading for information. I remembered thinking how heartbreaking it was, imagining what they must be going through. 4 months ago, right around the time Michael had moved in with us. "Zara, listen to me very carefully," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "How long have you been bringing food to Natasha?" "Since she first got here. She was really sad, and said Uncle Mike only brought her a little bit of food and it wasn't very good. So I started taking her crackers and fruit snacks from my lunchbox, and sometimes I take her water bottles." "Does Uncle Mike know you've been doing this?" "No, and Natasha says I can't tell him because then he might go away and she'd be all alone. But Mama, I think she wants to go home to her own family. She talks about her mom a lot." I felt like I was going to be sick. My daughter had been sneaking food to a kidnapped teenager in our basement for months while I worked my shifts upstairs, completely oblivious. The teenager whose disappearance had dominated local news, whose family had never stopped looking for her, had been living 20 feet below my kitchen this entire time. "Zara, why did you tell the police officer about this today?" "Because Natasha asked me to. She said maybe if I told a police person they could help her go home. But she made me promise to be careful about how I said it, because Uncle Mike told her that bad things happen to little girls who tell secrets." The casual way my 7-year-old delivered this information, the matter-of-fact tone she used to describe threats and imprisonment, made me realize how carefully she'd been navigating this situation. She'd been protecting someone, keeping a terrible secret, and trying to figure out how to get help, all while maintaining the pretense of normal childhood behavior. "Sweetheart, you did exactly the right thing by telling the police officer. You've been very brave and you've been taking good care of Natasha. Is she going to be okay?" "I'm going to make sure she's okay," I said, and meant it completely. "Are you going to call more police officers?" "Yes, but first I need to see Natasha myself. Can you show me where she is?" Zara nodded solemnly. "She might be scared of you." "At first. She's scared of grown-ups now, except for me." We went to the kitchen and I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip it. As we headed toward the basement door, I realized I was about to come face to face with the reality of what my brother had done. The basement stairs creaked under our feet as we descended. I could smell something off down there, a musty odor mixed with something else I couldn't identify. The main basement area looked normal, filled with our stored Christmas decorations and old furniture just as I'd left it. "She's behind the big bookshelf," Zara whispered, "in the room Uncle Mike made." I followed my daughter around the tall bookshelf that had belonged to my grandmother, and my flashlight beam revealed something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. There was a makeshift room constructed behind the shelf, hidden from the main basement area. Old blankets had been hung to create walls, and a bare mattress lay on the concrete floor. Empty water bottles and food containers were scattered around, and the smell I'd noticed upstairs was stronger here. And huddled in the corner, chained to an exposed pipe with what looked like a bicycle lock, was a teenage girl with long, tangled, dark hair and hollow, frightened eyes. "Natasha," Zara called softly. "I brought my mama. She's nice and she's going to help you." The girl looked up at me with an expression of such desperate hope mixed with terror that I felt my heart break. Completely. This wasn't some stranger. This was someone's daughter, someone's missing child, who had been living in unimaginable conditions, just steps away from where I cooked dinner and helped my own daughter with homework. "Hi, Natasha," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Rebecca. I'm Zara's mom and I'm here to help you go home." The girl started crying then, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. "Are you really going to help me?" she whispered. "Or are you going to hurt me like he said you would?" "I'm really going to help you," I promised, already reaching for my phone to call 911. "You're safe now. You're going home." As I dialed the emergency number with shaking fingers, I looked at my daughter, who was gently stroking Natasha's hand through the bars of her makeshift prison. "Mama, can we give her some real food while we wait for help?" Zara asked. She hasn't had anything good to eat in a really long time. Standing in that horrible basement room, watching my 7-year-old try to comfort a kidnapping victim with the same gentle care she'd show an injured animal, I realized that my daughter had been the only thing standing between Natasha and complete despair for the past 4 months. And tomorrow, Michael would come home from his night shift expecting to find his secret still safe, his victim still hidden, and his sister still completely trusting in the man he'd pretended to be. The 911 operator's voice was calm and professional, but I could barely form coherent sentences as I tried to explain what we'd found in our basement. "Ma'am, I need you to stay on the line while I dispatch units to your location. Are you and your daughter safe right now?" "Yes, he's at work until morning," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "The man who did this, my brother, he works night security. He won't be back until 7 a.m. And the victim, is she injured? Does she need immediate medical attention?" I looked at Natasha, who was still crying but trying to answer the operator's questions through me. She appeared thin and weak, but alert. She's conscious and talking. She looks malnourished and scared, but I think she's okay physically. Paramedics and police are en route. Please don't move anything in the area, and don't attempt to remove any restraints until officers arrive. While we waited, I sent Zara upstairs to get blankets and water. I needed a moment alone with Natasha to understand the full scope of what had been happening in my house. "Natasha, I'm so sorry," I said, crouching down to her level but keeping some distance so I wouldn't frighten her further. "I had no idea you were here. If I had known, I would have helped you immediately." "Zara said you worked at the hospital a lot," Natasha whispered. "She said you helped sick kids get better." "That's right, and I'm going to make sure you get all the help you need now." "He told me that if anyone ever found me, especially you, that he would hurt Zara," she said, her voice barely audible. "He said he would make it look like an accident, and then he would take me somewhere else where no one would ever find me." The casual way she delivered this threat, the way she'd clearly been living with this fear for months, made me understand why she'd been so careful about letting Zara help her. This brave teenager had been protecting my daughter even while imprisoned herself. "He's never going to hurt anyone again," I promised her. "The police are coming, and they're going to arrest him. But what if he comes back before they get here? What if he finds out that you know?" Before I could answer, I heard multiple sirens approaching our street. The cavalry was arriving, and none too soon, because my hands hadn't stopped shaking since we'd come downstairs. The next hour passed in a blur of activity that felt both surreal and intensely focused. Officer Valdez arrived with the first wave of responders, and I watched her face change as she realized the magnitude of what Zara had been trying to report at the fair. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to know that your daughter may have saved this young woman's life," she told me as paramedics carefully freed Natasha from her restraints and began evaluating her condition. Detective Maria Santos, who introduced herself as the lead investigator on Natasha's missing person case, took my initial statement while crime scene technicians began photographing everything in the basement. How long has your brother been living here? Detective Santos asked. 6 months. He moved in right after his divorce was finalized. And when did Natasha Reeves go missing? I remember seeing it on the news in late spring. April, maybe? April 15th. Your brother moved in when, exactly? I thought back to that February evening when Michael had shown up at my door. Early February. But detective, he couldn't have known Natasha then. He was dealing with his divorce, staying in hotels, barely keeping it together. Ma'am, predators often spend months or even years planning. The fact that he moved in with you, gained your trust, and had access to a house with a secluded basement, this likely wasn't a coincidence. The words hit me like ice water. You're saying he planned this from the beginning? That he used me and Zara? We'll know more as the investigation continues, but yes, that's a strong possibility. I thought about all those months of feeling grateful for Michael's help, all those times I'd praised him for being so good with Zara, all those nights I'd gone to sleep feeling secure, knowing there was another adult in the house watching over us. There's something else you need to know, Detective Santos continued. We found your brother's laptop in his room. We'll need to process it fully, but the initial search revealed extensive surveillance footage of the neighborhood, particularly focusing on teenage girls who live within a few blocks of here. You mean he was watching other girls too? At least 6 others that we've identified so far. Photos, schedules, route patterns. Your brother has been planning additional abductions. The room started spinning around me. Michael hadn't just taken advantage of our hospitality to hide Natasha. He'd been using our house as a base of operations for stalking multiple victims. Detective, my daughter, is she safe? Could he have hurt her? From what we can tell, your daughter was never a target. She was too close to the situation, too likely to be missed immediately. But Mrs. Chen, her access to the basement, her ability to move freely through the house, that's probably what kept Natasha alive these past 4 months. Zara appeared at the bottom of the basement stairs, holding the blankets I'd sent her to. Getting staring wide-eyed at all the police officers and paramedics. Mama, is Natasha going to the hospital now? She asked. Yes, sweetheart. The doctors are going to take very good care of her. Can I say goodbye to her? Detective Santos nodded, and we watched as my 7-year-old approached the stretcher where Natasha was being prepared for transport. I'm sorry I couldn't get help faster, Zara said solemnly. I tried to think of the best way, but it took me a long time. Natasha reached out and took Zara's small hand in hers. You saved my life, she said, tears streaming down her face. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Will you be okay now? I will be, because of you. And Zara, thank you for sharing your snacks with me. They made me feel less alone. As the paramedics carried Natasha upstairs and out to the ambulance, Officer Valdez approached me with a grim expression. Mrs. Chen, we need to talk about the arrest. Your brother's shift ends at 7 a.m., and he'll be coming home expecting everything to be normal. We need you and Zara to be somewhere else when that happens. Where are we supposed to go? Do you have family or friends you can stay with? Somewhere he wouldn't think to look for you? I thought about my friend Sarah, who lived across town and had been telling me for months that I could call her any time, day or night, if I ever needed anything. But what if he gets suspicious when we're not here? What if he runs? We'll have officers positioned around the house. If he arrives and finds it empty, we'll move in immediately. But Mrs. Chen, until he's in custody, I need you and your daughter as far away from here as possible. What do I tell Zara about all this? Detective Santos looked toward the stairs, where my daughter was now sitting, still holding Mr. Peanut and watching the crime scene activity with solemn attention. Tell her the truth, in age-appropriate terms. She's been living with this secret for months, and she deserves to know that she did everything right. She deserves to understand that the adults failed her by not listening sooner, and that none of this was her fault. As we gathered some overnight bags and prepared to leave the house that no longer felt like home, I kept thinking about all the signs I'd missed. Zara's nightmares, her strange questions about hiding places, her recent reluctance to be alone in certain parts of the house, her unusual quietness on days when I worked late and left her alone with Michael. At Sarah's house, I sat Zara down on the couch and tried to explain what was going to happen next. Uncle Mike did something very wrong by keeping Natasha in our basement, I told her. The police are going to arrest him, and he's going to go to jail for a very long time. Good, Zara said with startling firmness. He was mean to her. He made her cry all the time. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry you had to carry this secret by yourself. You should never have been put in that position. I wasn't by myself, she said simply. I had Natasha. We took care of each other. At 6:45 the next morning my phone rang. It was Detective Santos. We have him, she said simply. Michael Chen is in custody. He's been charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, and multiple other felonies. Natasha is safe, you're safe, and this nightmare is over. But as I hung up the phone and looked at my daughter, who was already awake and asking if Natasha was feeling better today, I realized that while Michael's arrest might be the end of his crimes, it was just the beginning of our long journey toward understanding how we'd all survive something that should never have happened. The most devastating part wasn't just that my brother had been a monster. It was that my 7-year-old daughter had been the only one brave enough and smart enough to recognize it, and the only one willing to risk everything to save someone she'd never even met before Michael brought her into our house as his prisoner. The trial lasted 6 months and felt like a lifetime. Michael pleaded not guilty despite overwhelming evidence, forcing Natasha to testify about her months of captivity. I sat in that courtroom day after day, watching my brother's defense attorney try to paint him as a man who'd suffered a mental breakdown after his divorce, someone who deserved sympathy rather than punishment. But the evidence was damning. The surveillance footage on his laptop showed he'd been stalking local teenagers for over a year before moving in with us. The makeshift prison in our basement had been constructed with meticulous planning, complete with soundproofing materials he'd purchased months in advance. Most horrifying of all were the detailed plans investigators found for additional abductions, including maps of walking routes and daily schedules for 6 other girls in our neighborhood. Your Honor, the prosecutor said during closing arguments, this was not the impulsive act of a desperate man. This was the calculated behavior of a predator who used his own family as cover for his crimes. Michael was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the verdict, he turned to look at me for the first time during the entire proceedings. I saw no remorse in his eyes, only rage that his carefully constructed plan had been exposed by a 7-year-old child. I never saw him again after that day, and I never wanted to. The psychological impact of living through something like this doesn't end when the criminal gets locked away. Zara and I both started therapy immediately, but healing from trauma isn't a linear process. There were nights when Zara would wake up screaming, not from nightmares about Michael, but from dreams where she couldn't find Natasha and couldn't remember how to help her. I keep forgetting where I put the crackers for her, she would sob. What if she's hungry and I can't remember how to get food to her? Dr. Patricia Weinstein, the child psychologist we found, explained that Zara had been living with an enormous emotional burden for months. The responsibility she'd felt for Natasha's well-being, combined with the fear of what Michael might do if he discovered her secret, had created a stress response that manifested in different ways as she processed the experience. Children who become caregivers in traumatic situations often struggle with letting go of that responsibility, even after the situation resolves, Dr. Weinstein told me. Zara saved Natasha's life, but she also carried the weight of someone else's. Survival for 4 months. That's not something a child's mind is designed to handle. My own therapy focused on the guilt that threatened to consume me. How had I lived in the same house with a kidnapped teenager and never known? How had I trusted Michael so completely that I'd never questioned his late-night movements, his locked laptop, his insistence on privacy in certain areas of the house? Predators are experts at manipulation, my therapist, Dr. James Rodriguez, reminded me repeatedly. They specifically target people's trust and exploit their desire to help family members in crisis. Your brother didn't just randomly end up in your home. He orchestrated the entire situation. The hardest part was accepting that Michael had likely never cared about me or Zara at all. Every kind gesture, every helpful act, every moment of seeming Brotherly affection had been calculated to maintain his cover while he used our home to commit unspeakable crimes. But gradually therapy helped me understand something important. Michael's manipulation was evidence of his evil, not my stupidity. The fact that I'd trusted my brother, helped him when he claimed to be in crisis, and believed in his capacity for change, these weren't character flaws. They were human responses that any decent person might have had in my situation. 6 months after the trial ended, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I started volunteering with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, sharing our story to help train law enforcement officers, teachers, and parents about recognizing signs that children might be trying to report something serious. Children often don't have the vocabulary or conceptual framework to report traumatic situations directly, I would tell groups of professionals. When my daughter told a police officer that Uncle Mike took my sister, she wasn't being imaginative. She was reporting facts in the only way she knew how. The response to these presentations was overwhelming. Other parents reached out to share their own stories of dismissing children's concerning statements as fantasy or imagination. Teachers talked about students whose behavioral changes they'd attributed to normal childhood phases rather than potential indicators of trauma or danger. Most importantly, several cases of child abuse and exploitation were uncovered because adults learned to listen differently to what children were trying to tell them. Natasha's recovery was slow but steady. She spent 2 months in the hospital dealing with malnutrition, muscle atrophy, and severe psychological trauma. Her parents, David and Monica Reeves, became like extended family to us during this process. "We can never adequately thank you," and "Zara, for what you did," Monica told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. "But we want you to know that our daughter is alive because your daughter refused to ignore someone else's suffering." The friendship that developed between Natasha and Zara was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Despite their 8-year age difference, they had a bond forged by shared experience that transcended typical relationship categories. Zara taught me that there were still good people in the world, Natasha told me 6 months after her rescue. When everything was dark and horrible, she would bring me fruit snacks and tell me stories about her day at school. She made me remember what normal life was supposed to feel like. For Zara, Natasha represented proof that she could make a difference in someone's life, that even children had the power to help people in crisis. "Mama, when I grow up, I want to help people like Natasha," she announced one evening over dinner. "Maybe I can be a police officer like Officer Valdez, or maybe I can work at a hospital like you." "You can be anything you want to be, sweetheart. You've already proven that you have the courage and compassion to help people who need it most." A year after Michael's arrest, we made another major decision. We moved to a new house across town, somewhere with no basement, no hidden spaces, and no memories of the worst months of our lives. Zara helped me pack up her old room, but she insisted on saving a special box of snacks. "These are for emergencies," she explained, "in case we ever meet someone who needs help again." The new house came with new routines and new neighbors, but it also came with something we'd never had before, a sense of security that wasn't dependent on trusting the wrong people. We installed a state-of-the-art security system, not because we expected danger, but because we'd learned that sometimes danger comes from the people you least suspect. Natasha visited us regularly, usually bringing homework that Zara would help her with despite being years younger. Watching them work together at our kitchen table, I often marveled at the resilience of both girls. Natasha was rebuilding her life with the determination of someone who understood how precious freedom really was. Zara was developing into a young person with an unusually strong sense of justice and an unwavering belief in the importance of speaking up for people who couldn't speak for themselves. "Do you think there are other kids like me who might know about people who need help?" Zara asked me one day. "Maybe." "Why?" "I think we should tell them that it's okay to tell grown-ups, even if someone said not to. I think we should tell them the police officers really do want to help." This conversation led to our involvement with a local elementary school program about personal safety and speaking up about concerning situations. Zara, despite being only 8 years old, became one of the most effective speakers in the program. "Sometimes adults don't listen the first time you try to tell them something important," she would tell groups of her peers. But you have to keep trying until you find an adult who understands, and if you see someone who needs help, you shouldn't just hope someone else will help them. You should try to help them yourself in whatever way you can. The impact of these presentations extended far beyond what we'd expected. Several children came forward to report inappropriate behavior by adults in their lives. Others shared information about friends or classmates who seemed to be in distressing situations. The ripple effect of teaching children that their voices mattered and their observations were valuable led to multiple interventions and investigations. 2 years after that terrible day at the community fair, I received a letter that changed how I understood our entire experience. It was from Linda Martinez, one of the mothers whose daughter had been on Michael's surveillance list. Dear Rebecca, the letter began, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Sophia Martinez's mother. Your brother had been watching my daughter for months, taking pictures of her walking route to school and documenting her daily schedule. The police said that, based on his notes, Sophia was going to be his next target. Your daughter didn't just save Natasha. She saved my daughter too, and probably several other girls whose families will never know how close they came to losing their children. Reading that letter, I finally understood the full scope of what Zara had accomplished with her 6 simple words to Officer Valdez. She hadn't just rescued one kidnapped teenager. She'd prevented multiple future abductions and potentially saved the lives of children whose names we would never know. But perhaps the most profound lesson came from watching Zara navigate the aftermath of her traumatic experience. Rather than becoming fearful or withdrawn, she became more empathetic and more determined to help others. Rather than losing her trust in adults, she learned to distinguish between trustworthy adults and those who might pose dangers. Mama, do you think Uncle Mike was always bad? Or do you think he became bad? She asked me one evening as we were reading together before bed. I think he made bad choices, and then he kept making worse choices until he became someone very dangerous, I told her. But sweetheart, most adults are good people who want to keep children safe. Uncle Mike was unusual, not normal. I know, she said thoughtfully. That's why I'm not scared of other grown-ups. I'm just better at paying attention now. This distinction became crucial to Zara's healthy development. She didn't become a fearful child who suspected every adult of having dangerous motives. Instead, she became a child who trusted her instincts and understood that she had both the right and the responsibility to speak up when something didn't feel right. On the 3rd anniversary of Natasha's rescue, we established a small scholarship fund at the local high school in honor of missing and exploited children. Natasha, now a confident 18-year-old preparing for college, spoke at the dedication ceremony. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over, she told the assembled crowd. I thought I would never see my family again, never go back to school, never have a normal teenage experience. But a 7-year-old girl decided that my life mattered enough to risk her own safety to help me. She taught me that hope can exist even in the darkest circumstances, and that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose compassion over comfort. Standing in that auditorium, listening to Natasha speak about resilience and hope, I realized that our story had become something larger than a tale of survival. It had become a testament to the power of children's voices, the importance of listening to what kids are trying to tell us, and the difference that one person can make when they refuse to look away from someone else's suffering. Zara, now 10, years old and increasingly articulate about her experience, had the final word at the ceremony. I used to think that being little meant I couldn't help with big problems, she said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. But I learned that sometimes the biggest problems need the smallest people to solve them, because kids notice different things than grown-ups do. We see when people are sad even when they're trying to hide it. We pay attention to sounds that adults think aren't important, and we believe that everyone deserves to be safe and loved, even when adults get confused about who deserves help. She paused, looking out at the audience with the same serious expression she'd worn when talking to Officer Valdez 3 years earlier. If you're a kid and you think someone needs help, don't wait for an adult to figure it out. Find a grown-up you trust and keep telling them until they listen. And if you're a grown-up, please remember that kids aren't just making things up when they tell you something that sounds strange. Sometimes we're reporting the most important things that adults need to know. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Zara's words, but for the profound truth she'd articulated about the wisdom that children possess and the responsibility adults have to listen to them. As we drove home that evening, I reflected on how much our lives had changed since that autumn day at the community fair. We'd lost our innocence about the safety of family relationships and learned harsh truths about how evil can hide behind familiar faces. But we'd also discovered reserves of strength we didn't know we possessed, formed friendships forged by shared trauma and recovery, and found a sense of purpose in helping others navigate similar crises. Most importantly, we'd learned that healing from trauma doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It means integrating the experience into your life in a way that makes you stronger, more compassionate, and more committed to protecting others from similar harm. "Mama," Zara said as we pulled into our driveway, "do you think we're different people now than we were before all this happened?" "Yes," I told her honestly, "but I think we're better people. We're braver, we're more aware of how we can help others, and we know that we can survive really hard things if we have to." "Good," she said with satisfaction. "I like who we became." Looking at my daughter, this remarkable young person who had risked everything to save a stranger and continued to use her experience to help other children find their voices, I realized that while Michael had tried to use our family to hide his crimes, Zara had transformed our experience into something that could prevent other families from enduring similar trauma. That night, as I tucked her into bed in our safe new house, Zara asked me the same question she'd been asking for 3 years. "Do you think Natasha is happy tonight?" "I think Natasha is very happy," I assured her. "She's with her family, she's getting ready for college, and she knows that she has a little sister who loves her and will always be part of her life." "Good," Zara said sleepily. "Everyone should have someone who makes sure they're safe." As I turned off her bedroom light and watched her drift off to sleep, I understood that this simple statement captured the most important lesson of our entire ordeal. Everyone does deserve someone who makes sure they're safe. Sometimes that person is a parent. Sometimes it's a police officer. Sometimes it's a teacher or counselor. And sometimes, when all the adults fail to recognize that someone needs help, that person is a 7-year-old girl with fruit snacks in her lunchbox and the unshakable belief that no one should have to cry alone in a dark basement. The evil that Michael brought into our house was real and devastating. But the good that emerged from Zara's courage to speak up, our family's commitment to healing, and our shared dedication to helping others, that good has proven to be more powerful and more lasting than the harm he tried to inflict. 3 years later, when people ask me how we survived something so terrible, I tell them the truth. We survived because a child refused to accept that suffering was inevitable, and she taught the adults around her to listen with more than just their ears. Sometimes the smallest voices really do carry the biggest truths, and sometimes when we're brave enough to listen to them, those voices can save more lives than we ever imagined possible.